This is not a pep talk to do more and just get through it. This is a burial, for we have mostly mistaken pressure for purpose. Like myself and Daniel, this episode is for those who've punished themselves in the name of progress, have beaten themselves up and been their own worst inner critic when something didn't work out as they thought it would, and then reframed it in the context of try harder next time. This is not a motivational episode, but we are here to dismantle the machinery inside of you that still thinks you need to be fixed and just apply willpower. Before we go into today's episode, we've written a eulogy. Daniel.
We gather today, not to praise willpower, but to lay it to rest. Not the sacred will that rises from within, but the false god we were taught to obey. The one who told us, if you collapse, you didn't try hard enough. If you suffer, you're getting somewhere. And if it hurts, you know it's working. It ruled us through shame, rewarded our self-abandonment. We called it strength, but it was silence in disguise. It is not evil, it is just exhausted. It served us once, but now we let it die. May its ashes become space for something real to move again.
No, I took that personally. This is the funeral for willpower, the ideology that transformation requires domination. When we have no idea what is happening to all the fragmented parts of ourselves, the different parts of our bodies, and just whatever lays under the hood. And it's not that we are disregarding willpower. There is a time and place for willpower. But there's a reason why, a very deep reason, why things tend to rubber band back to the status quo. And this is not about mindset and your self-image. We also played at that surface level, and we did that, and it worked for a short period of time. But when the unconscious was not brought into the conversation, then willpower only took us so far. So we've both had very different experiences when it comes to the application of willpower. And it's not that we lacked intelligence, resources. I mean, we lacked many different things, but there are people who had nothing and they made it to the top, like all sorts of things.
And you'll see them on the front cover of a magazine or an Instagram post.
Yeah.
And
but where
it's
they
why can't we do that?
Yeah.
Why can't others do that? What's missing?
But also where those people 10, 20 years from now when willpower has run out.
Yeah.
So
because I think of willpower like you go to work in the morning and you'll take your lunch and you'll take a bottle of water, a bottle of willpower. Sometimes you'll take a small bottle, sometimes you'll take a jug. But at the end of the day, it's like anything. It is a sort of finite resource as well. Even if you can train your own willpower, like training at the gym, the human vessel can only carry so much of it.
Now I want you to share moments in your life where you tried to force change, but a reason why we recorded this, because you were channeling a few days ago and the higher self was reminding us that, that we have weight issues or just issues in the physical, not only just with weight, because we are energetically obese. But we don't look in the mirror and, by the worldly measurement, we're not obese in that sense, but our energy is carrying more that we don't even know that we are carrying and holding on to, and we can map this all the way back to our soul's architecture, but we won't do that just yet. So can you give examples where you tried to work in the physical with human consciousness and it didn't work?
I mean, this is another one that came from, our work in trans channeling and bringing in the higher self. And this goes back to when I was 18 and diagnosed with chronic fatigue. And I didn't really know what was happening beyond the human experience, or the human perspective, I should say, because I was 18, I had to drop out of school, so I was working, and it's like, well, I got to get on with life somehow. And I was trying to do better at work, and then when I went to TAFE, I was trying to do better there, and it just, things weren't right. Now, when you mentioned the soul architecture, it's obvious looking back in hindsight that, yeah, it was so obvious. It was the whole design of who I was that wasn't corrected. But at the same time, willpower could give me results, but you can only push yourself against where you are as well. You know, we think of someone who, if you've ever heard of the term the try-hard, it's someone who isn't as cool as they think they are in the schoolyard, but they try and force it just a little too much that it's fake. And so why are they a try-hard? Because they're not actually working with their own nature. They're not relaxed into themselves. They're using willpower to force themselves to be a version of themselves that they're constructing. So, but just bringing it back to me, it was revealed, you know, just recently, just a few months ago, that a lot of what I've been trying to do is I've tried many times to start my own life, many times to move out, many times to do things that other people would naturally have come to them in life. Just today, I was mentioning to an ex-colleague how, you know, when you were young and you moved out, it was just the next step in life. But for me, that door was closed, and there was no amount of willpower that could make it happen, because as you mentioned with the unconscious, there was so much there that had to be sifted through, worked through, and ultimately altered. That willpower alone was getting me, I wouldn't just say I didn't have enough of it, but it was getting misused in the wrong way, in a very sort of burning the candle at both ends, rather than ordering more candles.
Do you also want to speak to, and this is pertinent for many people, the struggles at work? Like, I did the corporate hustle, and, you know, that effort to prove, to perform, to tick all the boxes, to jump to the hoop, to go under the radar, that then became the identity, but that stopped working. And how does society treat that? Get a better job, start a new business,
start a side hustle.
Yeah, just again go do something in the external. But if I had looked at the soul blueprint back then, I would not have taken the same action. So what was your work experience like when it comes to, you know, how far did willpower take you in that context?
Oh, vastly different. I mean, like with the health issues and with the lack of understanding or even emotional support at the time, even just the job I was trying to maintain, because I've had many different jobs, managers and even colleagues themselves, you know, I'd be trying harder and working harder to try and go up or work my way up in these positions. And not only were they just the wrong environment fundamentally, this goes back to the soul architecture, I was just in the wrong place. But I was still, again, just working with what I knew, going, right, I just have to do harder if I'm going to get anywhere here. And in most cases, it yielded next to nothing. And so all that left me with was burnout and no results anyway. And so that's also partly why there's been many jobs throughout my past as well that have led me ultimately to having to look within to recognize that, yeah, spoiler warning, soul architecture.
We'll speak to, I guess, many parts of looking within, one being the solar plexus as the power center and how that is either developed or deeply hindered. We'll speak to that in continuity. But also family, and that's one where we think that willpower is a badge of honor. Like, you got through it and it is how it is, and every family is like this, as if that's meant to, it's like a form of gaslighting. It's like every family has their baggage. It's like that's meant to be okay. And just because every family has their baggage, if you pop open everyone's unconscious hood, we'll go to see that no one is okay despite what they look on the outside.
There's different degrees of that. I mean,
different degrees, absolutely.
Like, how would you talk about your own sort of experiences with family? Not just direct, but anyone, even your corporate family in the past.
Who are they? Willpower, again, only took me so far, in that how long can you keep on dishonoring yourself and disrespecting yourself by upholding their templates, their paradigms, their patterns? They decided the lay of the land, and you just end up feeling more and more horrible playing their game. And willpower may have worked for 10 years, but isn't that, 10 years or 20 years or 30 years of fueling willpower and things aren't changing? It goes to show that no, it's not because I can't stick it out any longer or I can't apply myself, because clearly I can stick it out and can apply myself, but things aren't getting better.
And that goes back to sort of, I think, of the human design model. You as a generator as well. You've got the energy there, but the problem is to sort of make sure that, people aren't misusing it.
Yeah.
I'm an emotional manifester as well, so I'll do it until, oh crap, why am I in bed with no energy left? You'll just sort of get frustrated and
where did all of it
really
go?
like, ugh, why do I not like myself?
Mm-hmm.
I'm around the wrong people doing the wrong things. Like,
By
how
far.
would you find, like, what sort of comes to you now throughout your life in ways you've misused willpower in these sort of situations around other people?
Good question. As a generator, because we're meant to have a beautiful power bank, one that just an eternally blooming rose, and that's how it is when we apply it in the right direction. But when I worked in corporate, I would have like 10-day colds. It's like I have a relatively good immune system, like not optimal health, but I've never had afflictions or treatments or anything. And then later on, it's continuously giving that generator source, allowing other people to plug in so that they can drive even further. And then I'm somewhere in the rearview mirror getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and giving more and more and more energy to someone else's vision, to someone else's vista, to someone else's model of reality. And then I'm the one that can't wake up in the morning. I'm the one that can't even think straight. I'm the one that just can't do basic things like going out for a walk, like going to the gym. You just, depletion begets depletion. It's like, where did it all go? And everyone else is having a great old time. And that's also a big part of my design. Like, people just want me around them. Like, I bring the vibes.
Of course. Who doesn't?
I bring the vibes kind of thing, but then people take too much. Yeah. So then what do? I apply willpower. Just set my alarm and I'm going to get myself out of bed. And that was my reality for 2 years. And I didn't understand what was happening. And what was I told? Oh, it's this. You're this, you're that. You're this, you're that. But no one ever, hit deep enough. Like you started pointing me in that direction.
Like, it's funny that you mention like stories like that, because it's something we sort of share, is sort of that people pleasing tendency as well. They're the scripts we've inherited, to be the good child because our parents demanded it, our teachers demanded it, our bosses demanded it. And really it just goes back to these scripts that are running out. They're playing out, and we've aligned our willpower to uphold that script, that belief system. And it's that itself is a false paradigm we could do an episode on. But really it was the application of willpower into a false paradigm, and that's why it didn't work for us until we actually confronted the fact that we were people pleasers.
Very much so. That's one deep script, and that just has ripple effects into self-worth, self-love, self-respect, self, and having no truth left in our life. Because why would we need willpower when we are in alignment? Why would we need willpower when every day feels alive? Like, yes, there might be willpower to do the things that we don't like, but that should be the minority of things. That might be 10 to 20% of our life. But in our case, it was 80 to 90% of the things that we ended up having in our reality required willpower. Like, how difficult was it to just get to Christmas at times on your end? And for me, it was to, begrudgingly answer the 7th missed call and whatnot. And this is the tail end of things.
I think of like the Tao Te Ching, a very famous ancient book of Chinese mysticism, or Taoist mysticism. And really the concept of Wu Wei, or effortless action, is its closest translation. Where's willpower in a concept like that? Does the universe need to apply willpower to make it happen? To make itself happen? To exist? And so even though, willpower is a tool that we have access to, a lot of the time, I've seen it in us, but I also see it in so many other people, where they're just living a life playing out these beliefs, these false paradigms and belief systems, utilizing their willpower as it's not even just the regular fuel, but it's like tapping into the backup fuel. And you can only use so much of it before, as you said, with weight rubber banding back. That's something right now, to be told you're energetically obese, and it's like, to maintain our current weight, requires more and more willpower if we're not dealing with the energetic element of how we're feeling and clearing that energy to become stable and healthy again.
Just had a visual of our energetic bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah, not great. Just speaking of weight, you were telling me when we were planning the episode, the Biggest Loser case study. And before you speak to that, most people would say, well, it's their self-image, it's their perception of self. It's actually share the case study as to how people, the biggest losers rubber banded back, essentially.
Yeah, so it was a 2016 study, and it was when I was really getting into nutrition science. And I believe it was Dr. Jason Fung, a Canadian nephrologist, who was talking about particularly things like fasting and how it preserves the metabolism. And how the Biggest Loser, if you're not aware of the show, they take like mostly morbidly obese people and like military style training, they get them out in the fields doing exercises that even a lot of healthy people couldn't put up with for very long. And, they get them to eat these horrible, boring meals and then tempt them with like, decadent cake and treats in front of them. And if they want to choose, it's really just a form of torture, really. Even this is just to watch, not to be a participant in.
Mm-hmm.
But with this study, they actually found that 14 of the individuals, 13 of them had at least regained some weight, with 5 of them, so almost half, actually being within 1% of their pre-show weight. And so even though we might look and go, well, half of them basically had no effect, 5 years on, what they also found is that there was actually stress to their entire metabolism as well. So if they were to lose weight again, it'd be like an uphill battle. So it's not the same. It's not the same journey the second time around. And so even knowing how, they applied their willpower, they lost the weight, they haven't dealt with what caused them to gain the weight in the first place. What drove them to eat the foods that they did. And when you look to upbringing and stuff, you're given a whole paradigm on how to actually relate to food. And this is some of that soul, maybe this isn't soul architecture work, but it usually has some sort of connection to it in some way because it resonates with you. That, we'd even want to, grow up in families and like choose families for this incarnation to be able to, have these experiences as well. But knowing that most of them, had regained weight with almost half, gaining all of it. And then, having effects on their metabolism and their health in general just shows that just enormous amounts of willpower in a short time to radically transform the number on the scale really just, it isn't healthy and it isn't alignment and in service to all the parts of us, just a few that our willpower deems, valid or necessary to be able to achieve those goals. What did you think when you heard me mention those stats?
Well, from a psychosomatic perspective, weight gain is trying to protect yourself. It's like, what are you trying to protect yourself from, and where is that weight gain, and what parts aren't able to be present that allows you to process whatever it is that you want to. And of course, there's many parts at plays when it comes to food and diet, but also doesn't respect that if people went to the same environment which caused the pattern to establish in the first place, then that will inherently override. That is much stronger than that can be much stronger than the willpower to override it. So that's what I found. Like, I was doing the work, you were doing the work, but we were still going to the environments and the dynamics which upheld it and created it, not in the first place, but in this lifetime at least.
Yeah. And it's sort of like energetic warfare.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's almost like your willpower and your energy is being taken away from the life you want to create back into the life you sort of have to fall in line with. And, I think of one person in our life that we know that basically isn't respected by their family. And even though, they've traveled and they've done so much, they're still seen as a child. And knowing this person's story is just, it's quite liberating to hear how much they've done, how much they've achieved. But going back home to their family, like us going back to ours, you're still just the child. Even if you are, 20s, 30s, 40s, it doesn't matter. It's the same, I'm the parent, you're the child sort of dynamic. And so even willpower to change your life can be a real struggle when other people start to try and impose these old patterns of belief on you that you're still vulnerable to.
Absolutely. And I think environment, when it comes to willpower, people don't take that into consideration. And that's a big part of my experience. Was, sure, it looked great on the outset, and I definitely kicked in enough willpower to want to try and get myself out. I thought that my business would take off and that would just put me into a whirlwind of activity, and I'll just be, traveling and whatnot. It's like, who are you kidding? You're not going anywhere. You're lucky to go to your partner's house, freely, kind of thing. The situation is a lot different now. But I was in that hustle culture and that productivity addiction where, productivity and hustle was disguised as me becoming more. And sure, my willpower kicked in. I did 3 books during the world's longest lockdown, and I had clients, and I did do things in the world. But my value...
But is it fair to say, though, that other areas of your life were closing in?
Absolutely.
And that, this was a channel that you could allow the energy to flow. So
it's kind of like when the building's caving in or crumbling down behind you and you're running ahead, but you're not paying attention to the carnage and the wreckage behind you. And that was also a modality of escapism for me. And I
wouldn't call it escapism. I mean, you used it very productively, and it's yielded great results.
I did until it didn't. Because the willpower was overridden by unconscious forces that were much stronger than my ability to just push forward. Because it was 2022, I was doing the same thing, down to a T, and I had more of this, and now I had more time and whatnot. But I went from, at a very sharp decline, I went from multiple 5 figures, nearly 6 figures, part-time, still in COVID, worst part of COVID, 2021, to the next year, not even banking 4 figures under my own brand. And I couldn't realize what was happening, but I applied willpower. I sat there and I did the things, I did the doing. And a lot of, especially in the coaching industry, I think this is a really shortfall of the industry. It's not recognizing that mindset and all of the mindset habits and how you see yourself and affirmations, and you can vision board and journal all you want, but the unconscious forces are much at play.
That's me in front of doing affirmations, standing there in front of the mirror. It's like, I'm beautiful. You don't believe that. I deserve all the abundance in my life. We don't buy it.
But working from the right state. So it's not that affirmations themselves don't work, but it's in the right state, because we run scripts on each other in the right state, and they work in the right state. But consciously, it didn't. So
that was just another part of my conscious mind.
Yeah.
Trying to basically just overpower the part that wants to bring about the change.
Yeah. And the grind is just absolutely valued. How I remember being on a panel, even how there were 2 other women, and they took so much pride in sacrificing their family and their hobbies and foregoing their dreams because they were a woman in construction. And that was wonderful, to be on a mega project and to be a metric. It's like,
I just see kids at the table, like, without dinner. And a father like Homer Simpson there trying to open like a pudding can, and then it breaks.
But, this is all pointing in the direction of us, myself included, having built my self-worth on top of burnout, and I called it purpose, and I was applauded for it. How do you do so much? It's like, how? Well, my unconscious is running amok and my nervous system is fried. I have no relationships. I've pushed away all my friends. I only have parents in my life, and that's not to say they don't play a role, but at some point in time, when every other aspect has dominoed onto itself, you can't build a life on career alone. And even yet, willpower, especially in this industry, is like, just do this, and there's apps and there's tools, and like, if you don't do it, then you're not inspired enough, so you need to connect with your vision. But that just opens a whole other conversation.
Can I say, like, the fact that you mentioned the nervous system has just been so important, so powerful for us as well, because it's one of the first points of working against your nature, or working in spite of this energetic weight that we might carry. And weight isn't the right way to sort of explain it, but that feeling of heaviness feels like weight. That tension that we carry in our nervous system when we're stressed, especially if you carry it long term like we have. Weight and sluggishness is the way to describe that. And trying to apply willpower to overpower that only makes it worse. It's the classic Chinese finger trap sort of situation.
Speaking of systems, we aren't able to access that eternal spring of willpower, of wantingness to be alive, when our system, our internal systems, whichever one we're looking at, your nervous system, chakra body, physical body, emotional body, etheric body, you name it, if they're not aligned and they do not feel safe, and they don't want to do this because they know it's not the truth, but as you say, all parts serve the whole, then there will be collapse. So we said at the start we'd speak about the solar plexus. So traditional models, I guess, say that the root chakra develops between 0 to 7.
Well, they say in the first 7 years, this goes back to our shamanism workshop, the first 7 chakras actually get their template in the first 7 years, 1 year each. But really you're building up the root chakra through that time as well. And then moving on to the sacral between 7 and 14, where you learn how to really play and create things. And then we get into the solar plexus between ages of 14 to 21. And what's so significant about those years? It's when you finish school. It's when you go get a job. It's when you move out of home for a lot of people. Not us, of course. But really it's when you find your own sense of identity and push yourself out into the world to go achieve and to strive. And so the solar plexus also represents that sense of identity and willpower as well, to drive our own life as well.
I don't know about you. Well, I do know about you. My 14 to 21, it was the control started doubling down. There was no room to individuate. There was no ability to even start having my own sense of self. I remember once where I started, I guess, maybe emotionally detaching or wanting to really be in my own self, and my mother came to me crying how she feels like she's losing me or whatnot, and to me that was like death to mother, and it's like I can't have that, so therefore I can't exist. And you see people going out with friends and I'm not, or you see people being invited to parties and I'm not. And then even at 18 I was in Israel with my parents, and it seemed like a nice holiday and there were parts that were nice, but I remember seeing other 18-year-olds, they're going out with friends. They would be, I guess, by themselves, and I never had that. And then you start molding into the groove of uni, and I had to fight for my right to go out and all of these things.
Anywhere in particular, or just out of?
Just out, just to the city. That was even a big thing, or going out with friends. And then when you're driving, and that's when a lot of the the hectic missed calls started.
Did your mother have a copy of your timetable? And
yes,
she even knew what times to call you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's 2 minutes after that lecture finished. Why didn't you answer your phone?
Yeah, that triggered me, because that played out. That played out for the next 2 decades. But that period where the solar plexus is meant to healthily develop in a functioning society just couldn't, and that's just tapping onto my experience. And I didn't even look at the shadow of my teen years for a very long time. But what was your solar plexus development years like?
Yeah, well, I think back, I was, after my parents divorced, I actually was already struggling with weight issues, but then I became obese. And when I was 14, my mother started Weight Watchers, the point counting. And so when I found out about that, I started the day after her. And in a span of about 3 months, I think it was, I lost 18 kilos. And I was very dedicated, a lot of willpower. And I actually kept, for the most part, kept it off. Now, it was effort and it was maintaining and it was being more active, but I was able to. And then, comes 18 and the health issues, the chronic fatigue, leaving school, struggling. And then really starting to struggle, because right before around the time I turned 21, I actually put a lot more weight back on as well. This is when I actually started taking antidepressants and such for a whole bunch of other challenges. But I actually realized it was sort of a rise by losing weight at the very start of the development of the solar plexus, and the story ends tragically with it going back the other direction again, which I had never pieced together until now.
And of course the solar plexus comes in with its own architecture and blueprint, and it's not a clean slate, but just the experiences of this life. Even if it was, how conducive are so many systems, people in our life to cultivating our own inner power, not the power where you're cloaking the ego and saying, look at me, I'm success, and I'm doing so well on LinkedIn, posting twice a day. I'm having a dig at myself here because that's exactly who I was. But then I lifted the hood, and this soul is one of deep disempowerment across lifetimes, especially as a woman, and more abandonment when it comes to men, but as a man and men as well. So let's put a bow on it. It's that willpower will only get you so far. You can try and make as many actions and steps in the physical, but there's a reason why things rubber band, because the energetics are not dealt with. They're not understood. They're not integrated.
I mean, simply put, it's the willpower is used the wrong way. It's used to uphold a false belief system, and that there is working against the universe itself. And you can't be rewarded with anything you want doing it like that.
It's antithetical. Like, when you put it like that, it's like, how could it have worked? And when we're in the midst of collapse, sure, you want to know these things, but holding this perspective that there are stronger forces at play than just willpower. And
just the ego, really, and the application of willpower.
Yeah.
I mean, I even think back to, talking to people pleasing. If you've ever heard of the sunk cost fallacy,
oof.
It's one where you put so much time, energy, and effort into something that you just don't want to let it go, even if it's not bearing fruit, if it's not yielding anything. You don't want to let go. You want to sink more money into it on the belief. It's sort of like the gambler's fallacy, so to speak. Yeah, but I've lost this much. I'm bound for a win. No,
yeah.
you're not. But that was something I did quite a lot. Was I'd I'd like to play the role, and not always, but especially in my adult life, I'd like to play the role of the arbitrator. I'd love to work together and the mediator to bring people together, especially when they couldn't see eye to eye, and always playing devil's advocate to support the person that wasn't present. But it was, even though it was noble, that itself was also another false paradigm. Sometimes people don't want to get along, and holding that belief and using your own willpower, even against when it feels right, is not always something that can serve.
Willpower without integration is violence, and that which we are violent against is ourselves and different parts of ourselves, because like most of your adulthood and mine, it was trying to push shit uphill. And it wasn't from lack of intelligence or lack of, we didn't love our situations at all. We both tried to get out as best as we could. But trying harder is often the last defense against truth, because how in those situations, where was truth in those situations? Where was truth to be found? It was exactly as you said, simply trying to uphold false paradigms. Yeah. And look, it may not come down in this lifetime, but it does come down.
I even think too, when we have clients for our past life hypnosis through QHHT, and a lot of them try and use the willpower to stay present as the ego without actually just surrendering that and knowing, well, it's what the recording's for. And they apply their willpower rather than surrendering, and then they have trouble going as deep as they could. Because when we try and ask, I mean, this even happened in one of your sessions, you were so eager for the answers that you forgot to leave. You forgot to relax fully, to allow, your own higher self to really fully take the mic. And so its message came through, but it was somewhat diluted.
And limited as well.
Yeah.
So if something isn't working in your life, and it's not because you haven't tried, it's not because you haven't explored it, it's not because you love it so much, but what is happening deeply under the hood. And as we say, there is the right tool for the right job, but just bringing awareness of what in your life feels so heavy. It could be the job, it could be the relationship, it could be the business, it could be anything in your life right now which simply isn't working. It could be the financial situation, and you might get to a point where you just fry your conscious mind like I did, and it's like
we did.
We have.
If we're not careful, we can still fall back into.
And that's right. You don't need to get to a point of frying your conscious abilities, but invite yourself into a deeper investigation and really examining where is the truth in this situation, because there is no truth, there is no you. And what does that mean? It means being small and trying to just push harder. And the world will glorify you for that. The world will celebrate you.
Not always.
Not always.
Depends how it's done.
That is
But
true.
regardless how it's done, or even if you do get the praise, we know it's not ultimately serving yourself.
That's right.
That goes back to the violence you mentioned.
So our questions for reflection for those listening are...
Where am I still using effort to silence myself? How much do we want to put in? We think effort is the answer. But what if it's not? What if it's really just, let's sit back and observe? I think back to the time my parents divorced, and I would just... Some of my actions were I was starting to act out a little because I was desperate for the attention. And so when that started to, I started getting punished, I was like, well, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? And I didn't have the full awareness at that age, but if I could just stop and go, what am I doing? Rather than using my effort to do something different just to pay attention to myself, that could have yielded a completely different life for me.
If I had listened to this episode 3 years ago, I would be so triggered and I would have gone into a state of denial. It's like, what would you know?
Yeah.
Don't you know how hard it is? And don't you know how important it is to work and to do X and do Y? And I'm going to get through it, and then I'm going to be that strong, independent person. I would have rejected this, but a deep part of me would have been so restless and it would have hit. I know it would have. So this has been Resonant Truth. I'm Eleanor Moshe on the Eleanor Moshe on Instagram.
And I'm the Daniel Darman on Instagram.
Please do let us know. Has anything fallen over? Have you just laid down the armor and realized that this isn't working? Willpower will only take you so far, and if it got you so far, hold space for that and know that if it was aligned, how far it can actually take you. So if you love what you're listening to, leave a comment below. If you're listening on YouTube, or let us know on Instagram what resonated with you. Until the next episode.
You're too big to be this small.